Hello, welcome to another Instagram Live conversation in our Mental Health and Gen Z series. My name is Marte Aboagye. I'm the head of community engagement at Springtide Research Institute, and today we are delighted to have two rabbis joining us in conversation. We have Rabbi Joshua Stanton and Rabbi Benjamin Spratt. They're both in the New York area, and they have just co-written a book that it just released. We're one of the first conversations that get to highlight this brand new resource for faith leaders, for anyone who's curious about spirituality and religion. So we're gonna dig in with both of them joining. I see they're in the chat here, so let's get them into the call. And we're gonna dig in to learn more about this book and how it corresponds with some of our research findings at Springtide. Okay, at least Rabbi Josh joining, which I'm thrilled to see you. Hello.
It is so wonderful to be with you. Thank you for bringing us together in this conversation.
I'm delighted. It's really nice to see you virtually. We used to get to connect in person when we were both in the New York area, but it's been awesome to have you contributing to Springtide. I'll mention this later, but Rabbi Josh was one of the contributors to our flagship report for 2021. So you've been in conversation with our Springtide findings, and I know you did a previous Instagram conversation with Josh at our organization. Two Joshes in conversation then, but we're excited to get Rabbi Ben in as well. So let me accept him in to the conversation, and all three of us get to connect on this material today. We are really excited to highlight for our audience and for anyone else tuning in today that Awakenings is it's available. It's for online readers. It's for, like, there's a digital version too, right? It's for print readers. We'll make sure you guys get to mention all the places it's available. Let's see if Rabbi Ben will connect here. I'm hitting accept, but you always know sometimes there's little funny technical glitches. Well, while we're making sure he can get into the conversation, do you want to just tell us a little bit about who you are, the faith community that you work with, and your work as a rabbi in New York?
Absolutely. So I'm the rabbi at East End Temple in Manhattan, and I'm director of leadership at CLAL, the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership. And my job is to cause benign and loving trouble. And you and I have had the chance to work together. And Rabbi Spratt, who is joining us now, he and I have been longtime collaborative partners, working to disrupt the status quo and also ask difficult questions that I think too many people have shied away from. Rabbi, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you do when you're not on Instagram?
I think you captured it perfectly. So Josh and I are dear friends, and part of the friendship really is at the center of it has been stepping into a world where we have wanted to learn from each other, but really from everyone. I've always been a real admirer of Josh's, not only for leading with authenticity, but always being the one to go to the margins to listen to the voices of those around us. And we started doing that a decade ago together, and the result is project after project, collaboration after collaboration, and the most exciting thing we're doing now is really going to spark conversations like this one. So an honor to be with you, Martin. Honor to be with you, Josh.
Fantastic. Oh, I really do see you both as people who are asking not just hard questions, but important questions that we see our audience engaging, and definitely the young people that we are committed to listening to and amplifying their perspectives, those same difficult but necessary questions about faith, about identity, about what does it look like to live in the world today and want to connect to ancient wisdom, ancient ritual, but still be really rooted in this present time and making those connections. So I know there's going to be a lot of good stuff to dig into today. So I want to congratulate you both on the release of Awakenings. That is phenomenal. It's no small thing to publish a book, and I wonder even if co-authoring is in some ways more work in the sense, like any good group project, when you collaborate, sometimes it's more effort, but that much more fruitful as well. So yeah, the full title, you all listening, is Awakenings: American Jewish Transformations in Identity, Leadership, and Belonging. How would you guys describe this book for our audience, which may include folks in the American Jewish community, as well as people from other faith traditions and probably no faith identity as well?
It relates a lot to your work, actually. So 100 years ago, American Jews were trying to integrate as a community primarily of first-generation immigrants, and they were trying to find a way to hold both American and Jewish identities. They built organizations so that they could do that, and to a remarkable extent, they've succeeded. And now the question becomes, if you don't need to go to my synagogue or even Ben's to be both Jewish and American, what is it that brings us together in community, in belief, and in all other aspects of life? And what you've been studying that makes so much sense is well-being, not just mental health, but the broader notion of what it is to thrive. And so we are shifting from a place of trying to survive and integrate to trying to thrive and self-actualize. And those are the glimmers of awakening that we see.
Yeah, that historical context is so necessary to see, like, okay, this was the reality maybe for previous generations, but what does it look like now to be Jewish in America? And what can we lean on in terms of those past generations? And what can we co-create? I like that phrasing that you all readily lean into in your book. There's so many things, some that you've already alluded to, that show up in Springtide's research that you both are very curious about as well. I mean, just the title alone sparks a lot of connections with our same research interests, whether it was our inaugural report, which was called Belonging, but that was focused a lot on reconnecting what is America's loneliest generation, because Gen Z is in fact America's loneliest generation. Not to say that other generations aren't experiencing tremendous loneliness or social isolation, but that report even came out pre-COVID, right before COVID started, actually. So just think of what the social fabric has looked like then in the last few years. So belonging, right off the bat, is one of the themes that we definitely see. Identity is just a core pillar of something we're committed to exploring. And I know your book looks at a lot of intersecting identities as well, and the ways that those come up for the American Jewish community in terms of there's multiple layers that everyone carries with them alongside of faith curiosities and commitments. Exploring a shared sense of purpose. Purpose is a major theme in our mental health and Gen Z research, as well as just always looking at how do people reclaim and reimagine different spiritual practices, building different modalities of community. I could go on and on, but all these themes, it's exciting to me to have your book connect with the same questions we're exploring with Gen Z. What inspired you guys to embark on writing this, and why are these themes so central to what you're wanting to explore?
So for both me and Josh, for over the years, we were noticing that some of the most inspiring people to us were people that were not finding their place of belonging in the center of communities like the ones in which we now work. We were noticing that most of the leaders in the Jewish religious sphere, but also in other religions, tended to not be reflective of the people that were most in need of belonging. And we decided we actually wanted to go and listen. And it was in the listening that we started to see that the rising generation of Gen Z, the declining attendance at synagogues and churches and mosques, is not actually because of a wayward generation, but actually a rising generation that's very plugged into what they need and what they want. And nobody was listening to them. And so it really started with us starting to have a lot of coffees and drinks and listening. And we turned to each other, and that was what sparked it, really, was just listening.
Man, it's like you're reading our research front to back, because that's so much of what our actionable insights come down to, is to genuinely listen, to not just come in with your own answers or your own authority, but to have a posture of humility and curiosity, and really wanting to know someone's story. So the fact that Gen Z's stories were so pivotal in shaping this and sparking that interest for you to embark on this project is really tremendous. I know that folks listening can already be, take that and put it in your back pocket in terms of like how far that will take you in terms of building connections with the young people in your communities, or maybe not in your communities. Just as you were alluding to, Rabbi Spratt, that there's a lot of young people who might not be connected to a traditional house of worship, or they might not be connected by saying, I can check this box that I am this religion. So much of what we're seeing from Gen Z is that they're saying, hey, I appreciate a lot of different religions, and a lot of different types of spiritualities are informing who I am and the questions I'm asking and the ways I'm wanting to investigate faith. And our research is uncovering this over and over again. So we know that's kind of a core question you're asking and answering in the book. So what are you two finding in terms of people, Gen Z or beyond Gen Z, who are saying that religious orgs have maybe lost touch with modern spiritual needs?
One of the key findings is that Judaism can be multiple types of identity. You can be part of the Jewish people, like many other ethnic communities or cultural communities. And we're also a wisdom tradition. And because of the history of oppression of Jews, we haven't really turned outwards and made sense of how we can contribute to people's lives, even if they do not seek to become a part of Jewish people. But how wonderful would it be if some people adopted a Shabbat practice, even if they didn't become Jewish? So many people already engage in Passover Seders, and while they can be appropriative sometimes, they can also be deeply appreciative and add tremendously to the spiritual lives and social lives of people. So what we need to begin imagining is how we can add meaning, purpose, depth to people's lives using the ancient traditions and practices that have been present in Judaism for thousands of years. How can we adapt and adopt them? How can we communicate them more effectively so that they answer the needs that we're hearing again and again? That's the short of it.
I love that. That's inspiring to me as someone who's worked inside and outside of faith communities, to have two faith leaders, two rabbis telling us right now that your goal sometimes is just to inspire someone to cultivate a deeper sense of meaning and to lean on past wisdom, traditions, and past rituals to have them be reintegrated or maybe added for the first time to someone's practice, whether that's inside your actual faith community or beyond it. That's really, I think that's a surprising answer, actually, for a lot of people to hear two faith leaders write a book and continue to testify to that, rather than saying, oh, the goal is conversion, or the goal is, more seats inside the building filled. That I don't hear that as the explicit goal of what you're hoping to cultivate as rabbis accompanying young people or other generations when it comes to connecting with this wisdom tradition.
Exactly, and I think that's some of what we were lifting up is, as Josh mentioned, a century ago, people from a place of need turned together to create a center of belonging that could amplify structures and supports so they could address those existential needs. What we're basically inviting is to return back to that and seeing rising generations are telling us a story right now. And listen, Springtide is one of the organizations that's listening and trying to lift up the data that reflects that story. And whether or not faith leaders like me and Josh are listening, there are going to be new centers of how faith coheres and inspires people. We just would love to invite the structures, the leadership, the wisdom of what has been to be a part of that journey.
I love it. So inspiring and so well said. Like I already said before, I'm already getting more excited in this conversation just to have young people hear this message, actually, that faith leaders want to accompany their questions and want to resource them in ways that feel meaningful to their own lives in this world, and to see that as like a model that, yes, you're co-creating something, but you're also replicating what was done in previous generations as well. So maybe like nothing new under the sun sort of idea here. And yet it does feel fresh, because I think a lot of religious institutions and a lot of religious leaders don't always come in with this message, or don't come in with this posture when connecting with young people. I know that there's much more you could say about this, and folks can read the books to get the full answers, but is there anything else you want to speak to of what it means for religious orgs, whether that's synagogues or whether that's another institution? What does it look like for those orgs to remain relevant in today's world?
So I want to actually start with a piece of Springtide research
Sure.
that spoke about the importance of mentoring young people and how good it is for well-being, for it reduces all kinds of rates of depression, suicidality, other very challenging realities in our world. What I'd love to see is the impact of young people on their older mentors, because I would describe myself as fundamentally changed as a person from those interactions.
Wow. Yeah.
And our institutions are too. So what is the future of faith? If you were to ask me, it is turning our traditions back into a conversation and less into a monologue, as it has been for too long. Rabbi Spratt beautifully quotes often that we don't need a sage on the stage. We need someone in conversation.
Yeah.
We need someone listening
That's
deeply,
good.
and that will forever transform our institutions, because if we're listening, the status quo is not going to work.
So reciprocity is what I'm hearing. Like, yes, like, please mentor a young person, connect and empower that young person, but be ready to be challenged, transformed, changed in the process as well. I think that's tremendous.
And I think for anyone who feels alone right now, for anyone who's feeling pain, for anyone who's struggling, what we're effectively saying is actually that experience is the starting point of you being a leader in the world. And for any of you who are feeling that way, we would want to listen to you. And because we need to know that you are not alone in that loneliness, you are not alone in that pain. And there's so many wanting to bond together with you. And Josh and I have talked about this, that every faith tradition started with a marginalized figure. You look at Moses, you look at Muhammad, you look at Jesus, you look at Buddha. These were all people that struggled or suffered on the margins of society. Yeah. And part of what Springtide is lifting up is not only telling the story of a rising generation that has needs that are not being met right now, but inviting us to see that in those needs, in the call and the cry, is also the very direction and path for us moving forward.
Yes. And so much of modern religion isn't lifting up that reality of marginalized voices from their own traditions and from the voices in their own communities, cities, areas. So I think that's really significant to draw that parallel from so many different religious traditions. Something I love in Awakenings that feels very parallel to Springtide is that you argue that Jewish identity, wisdom, ritual, and power are being remixed and reimagined. And that as centralized authority declines, what you two are both saying should happen, and kind of whether it should or happen or not is happening a lot, as we see just across the board, all generations having lower institutional trust, that American Judaism moves and grows in a multitude of directions. But that phrase I said in the first sentence, remixed and reimagined, it reminds me so much of Faith Unbundled, which is a prominent section in our flagship report from 2021. I'm holding it up right now. It's the state of religion and young people navigating uncertainty. And there's a whole section that unpacks this idea of faith unbundled, but it's essentially the idea that so many young people are decoupling or unbundling different religious traditions and remixing it and rebundling it for what fits for them, borrowing from different traditions, different faith systems. And that concept feels very similar to this remixed and reimagined. We really would love to just to have our listeners have you put that in your own phrase, your own context of what that means for you both as faith leaders, what it means to accompany a young person who is in a place of constant fluctuation. And actually, Rabbi Josh, he is one of the contributors that I mentioned at the top in this report. And the section in Faith Unbundled that he's speaking to is called Don't Fix the Flexibility. So I'm wondering if either of you can, speak to what does it look like for a faith leader or a trusted adult to accompany young people who are in this remixing, reimagining, or this unbundling, rebundling process.
It's extraordinary. It is a total gift for us as spiritual leaders. There's an amazing book by Richard Bullitt called Islam: A View from the Edge, from Columbia University Press. And it talks about how the converts in the early centuries of Islam really defined the center. And we're finding the same phenomenon in Judaism today. Those who, for any number of reasons, feel that they're on the margins. Or because,
you might have froze a little bit, so we might have Rabbi.
My apologies.
Oh, you're back.
People on, I hope so, and if not, Ben, take it away. People who feel on the margins for any number of reasons, be it they are not straight, white, cis, male, Ashkenazi Jews from major urban centers, or any subcharacteristic, if they are Jews by choice who are converting, if they are family members of Jews, whatever it might be, actually often ask more helpful questions and force a rearticulation of belief in practice that actually changes the core itself. And so every time someone asks a challenging question, every time someone invites us to walk with them on their journeys, they are changing the core of the tradition for the better, and they're changing us for the better. It is fundamentally challenged.
I bet he's going to be back in, but it's fundamentally.
So, and I think it's fundamentally a part of how we see a world bloom with new creation. And we can see examples of this all over the place. It's a lot cleaner to look at a color palette and look at, we've got yellow, we've got red, we've got blue, and keep it in nice, wonderful, categories. But the real wonder of this world comes with the collision, and it does get messy at times.
Sure.
But it is in those experimental collisions, intersections, and interweavings that every one of us in our life get to see. Once we get past the unsettled feeling of a new flavor, a new color, a new identity, we suddenly see that it's added something to the world we never could have imagined or before, and now can't imagine without. And that's some of what we're getting to see is we look at individuals that are carrying so many different threads that in prior generations could never have been imagined. And in that intersection challenges how we've understood Jewish identity, Jewish belonging, or talk about other faith identities. But what has come out of it now is we are a part of communities where some of the most active and involved models and leaders in the community are not Jewish, and yet they're building a Jewish community. We have people who come from different regions of the world who are looking at an admixture of not only how might a Bangladeshi and a Southern Black and an Ashkenazi Jewish identity all mixed together, but want to have a belonging where that challenging invites us to create anew. And as we look at Jewish history, we've done that again and again, and feel blessed to be in a place where we get to see a new wave of that new creation coming today.
Man, look at these co-authors, collaborators, already like finishing one another's sentences in just profound, beautiful, truthful ways. That, this remixing and reimagining, I like that idea of a color palette, Rabbi Spratt, because you're right. Things can be really neat with just here's our red circle, here's our blue circle, here's our yellow circle. But how much more vibrant when we listen to those on the margins to help us remix and reimagine, to maybe do some unbundling, rebundling. How much more vibrant it is. Yes, messy. Like I'm seeing a Jackson Pollock painting or something that might be messy, but how much more interactive and alive these things become when there are all those crossovers, and willing to listen, willing to step back and let someone else lead who you wouldn't assume would be the leader or the convener or the person carrying on traditions, just as you alluded to. I mean, I know your book even has voices that you're bringing in who aren't necessarily from your own tradition. Even just in the foreword and the afterword, you bring in a Black Christian woman pastor, and then you bring in a Muslim faith leader who does lots of interfaith work. I'll let you both say anything more to that, but even what you're proposing, I see very much done with a lot of intention and care in terms of the other voices in this book, in Awakenings.
We are so lucky to learn at the feet of really wise people, you included. Oh. And we are blessed to try to take a posture of learning wherever we go. And Pastor Kaji Dosha, Dr. Ibu Patel, they have been our teachers, and they had insights and perspectives on Jewish community that we didn't, because we're too much in the thick of it.
Sure.
And what a gift they gave us in our community. And we hope that similarly, the book fomented conversation within the Christian communities, within the Muslim communities of which they are a part. So again, reciprocity, posture of learning. And if you're confident in who you are and what you're about, then you don't need to feel challenged by what other people are about or other people's traditions.
Yeah, that is very true for faith leaders to say, like, I have something to learn from someone else. I'm going to be deeply rooted in my own practice and my own tradition, and have so much to learn, glean, appreciate from someone else's. So yeah, there's no sense of competition. I'm hearing there's no sense of feeling threatened by a different experience or perspective, but how they can work together and enrich one another. I mentioned that we have this flagship report. I mentioned the last year's, the one that's about to release. It'll come out in October. I see a lot of the same exciting themes that you all draw out in Awakenings. And this year's report for the State of Religion and Young People 2022 is focused on mental health, because we are deep into this commitment in 2022 and extending into 2023, where all of our research is really honing in on mental wellness, on mental health, and what is Gen Z telling us, and what can educators take away, what can faith leaders take away, what can parents and caregivers, workplaces, employers take away. All of our reports are kind of giving different tools from the research for these different roles and places. But the faith leaders one is the State of Religion and Young People 2022. And I mean, there's so many findings I could draw out. But what I want to speak to is that fewer and fewer people, especially among Gen Z, are identifying with a particular religious system. We've already alluded to that in today's conversation. But while they're not identifying with one particular system, they're saying they are religious or they are spiritual. They're self-identifying in this way to us. So the narrative that sometimes is incorrect, that's out there, is that Gen Z doesn't care. But they're actually telling us how much they are curious and committed to investigating for themselves spirituality and religion and faith. So 62% of Gen Z have told us that they agree that there are many parts of many different religions and spiritualities that they agree with. And 48%, so nearly half, say, I feel like I could fit in with many different religions and spiritualities. That's a significant finding for half of Gen Z to say, I could fit in with Judaism, I could fit in with Islam, I could fit in with Christianity, I could fit in with Sikhism, like on and on and on. That's no small thing. So I see your book as a really important text for now, for faith leaders and other trusted adults to understand, what can I do to support these questions, to support these curiosities from Gen Z who have deep curiosities about spirituality and religion. So given those stats and just the idea that there's so much interest there, I want to give one other piece to build off of that, and that is that those who identify as religious or spiritual, whether that's with a single tradition or whether it is like the stats I just gave you from, they could fit in with a multitude of traditions, or they're borrowing from many different faith systems. They say those who identify as religious and spiritual, they are the ones across the board who tell us they are flourishing in their mental health. And that tells us a lot, that it's not even, that these two aren't in opposition. Because I think sometimes it feels like, okay, they're not coming to my church, they're not coming to my synagogue, so they must not care about these same things. So we already know that's not true. They're telling us they care deeply about it and spirituality. They're also deeply connected to their own center of being and reporting high levels of mental wellness, emotional and mental well-being. So all of that, like I said, it was hard to even pick out what stats I want to draw out. What does it look like to widen access to Jewish ritual and to this wisdom tradition? What does it look like to build new networks of belonging for Gen Z and beyond?
So amazing formulation. And for those who have, I hope will flag the importance of reading this report, because again, part of what we need is stories. And I think this is one of the ways that we can actually impact people's lives, is every religious tradition takes narrative as a way of giving individual identity, but also a sense of place and purpose. And as much of modern research, and certainly Springtide has emphasized this, as shown, human flourishing requires three primary things: a sense of gratitude for what is, no matter what you're going through in life, a sense of belonging to at least a small group of people, and a sense of hopeful purpose, or purposeful hope, the sense that I'm reaching towards something and I have a place that's needed in that. And religion offers many tools towards that, but often we've forgotten the origin story of where these rituals came from. And some of this is going back and lifting them up. What might it be for prayer to not be a way of how we create division and barrier and say this is how we're different from the world, but what if prayer was an opportunity of saying, how do we say thanks for the blessings in our life? And how do we out loud, in public, collectively, name our shared hopes together? How might that feel? Talking to a person a few weeks ago who joined a meditation studio here. It's a Buddhist meditation studio. He doesn't identify as Buddhist, but it's part of his daily practice because it's an environment that clearly allows him to connect to his own sense of self and inspires him to do good for other people. And that, I wonder, is maybe a model that we can draw on. How might we reimagine synagogues, churches, mosques, but as rabbis, we'll talk about synagogues for a moment here, to be these centers of well-being for people in mind, body, and soul?
Oh, sign me up. Like that's the type of faith community that gets me excited, and I'm a millennial, so I see this reflected in those younger than me as well. I feel like I could keep talking to y'all for quite some time, but you've already given us so many rich just gems from your book, from Awakenings, and from your own commitments as rabbis. Where can people get a copy?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, Berman House, which is the Jewish publisher we publish through, lots of places.
Target,
and
right? I saw
Target,
it on Target's
apparently,
website.
Walmart. Really surprising places. And we're going to be involved in more conversations throughout the fall and winter and spring. And again, these are real conversations. Ben and I, Rabbi Spratt and I, learn as much, if not more, from every single one of which we are a part. And so thank you for the blessing of this conversation.
I feel your posture, both of you, your posture of listening in humility and commitment to not just centering yourself, not being another sage on the stage. I'm gonna use that one. I feel that deeply from you both. We're excited for this conversation to be something people can play back and listen to again beyond the live. So make sure you are following Springtide, because we will have this resource on our mental health and Gen Z page on springtideresearch.org. It'll be on our Instagram as well, but you can find it, you can circulate this conversation and let it spark its own discussions in your own communities, in your own questions, whether you're Gen Z or whether you're someone who really wants to support and accompany Gen Z. Yeah, is there anything else you two want to add, or where folks can follow each of you and your work beyond the book?
I think the biggest thing is gratitude. Gratitude for all of your leadership and Springtide's leadership, again, to lift up the data that helps us see the stories that we've ignored. And the last thing is really, we just welcome anyone who wants to be in touch with me and Josh. Mostly it's a chance for us to learn from you. But as I mentioned before, for anyone who feels like you are alone, struggling, feeling on the margins in some way, shape, or form, we hope, if nothing else, you hear that we believe that you are part of the leaders of what will be the next chapter of what we hope is not just American Jewish flourishing, but we hope American flourishing, as we need to learn how to stand together in society, hold together, and we look to you as our teachers. So please speak out, reach out to us. We look forward to connecting.
Thank you, Rabbi Spratt. Thank you, Rabbi Stanton. We are so grateful to be in conversation with you both, and congratulations again on the release of Awakenings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peace.